In Europe, they began creating their own alternatives to the North Atlantic Alliance after the high-profile statements made by the American president. After threats and insults from Donald Trump, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, is convening emergency talks with representatives from 35 countries to form a coalition to ensure the security of shipping in the Hormuz Strait after the cessation of hostilities. But the main condition is that it be without the United States. At the meetings of ministers and military officials, they plan to discuss specific measures. This includes escorting commercial vessels with warships, demining the strait, and protection against possible attacks from Iran. But most importantly, France, the Netherlands, and a Gulf state will take part in the negotiations, which shows that both NATO and the Gulf countries do not rely on Donald Trump. At the same time, the publication Politica today published an excellent article, and citing diplomats from 24 European countries, the publication writes that Donald Trump's anger at his NATO allies for their refusal to join the war against Iran has so far led to only one thing. They have all united against him. In Europe, they have even started actively developing alliances without America, and these are full-fledged military alliances. For example, an alliance of 10 countries that's Scandinavia, the Scandinavian countries. These are the Baltic countries and the United Kingdom. But this is not the only example. Overall, it seems that Britain, is very offended by all these statements from Trump and has decided to prepare its own alternative, a serious military alliance. Moreover, I want to emphasize with the participation of the Gulf countries, meaning those very monarchies. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Leave any comment you want. And be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, the United Kingdom is holding talks with 35 countries about forming a coalition to ensure the security of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz after the end of hostilities. And at the meeting of foreign ministers, it is proposed to discuss specific measures. This includes escorting commercial ships with military vessels, mine clearance of the strait and protection against possible attacks from Iran. At the same time, a meeting of military officials is planned to discuss possible actions of the naval forces. France, the Netherlands, and importantly, a Persian Gulf state will participate in the negotiations, among others. And now, a representative of the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs compared the initiative to the coalition of the willing created to ensure the security of Ukraine. Until now, European countries have rejected it. Calls by US President Donald Trump to send their naval forces to the Hormuz Strait, not wanting to help Trump solve the problem. And here the most important shift occurred. Keir Starmer is forming a coalition that includes not only NATO countries but also Gulf countries, while completely excluding the participation of the United States of America. And now the most interesting part. The United Arab Emirates is set to be one of the most active participants in this military coalition and is persuading the US as well as European and Asian allies to join forces for a military operation to unblock the Hormuz Strait. The Emirates, together with Bahrain, are now working to have the UN Security Council adopt a resolution that will grant this coalition the appropriate mandate. The formation of the coalition is complicated by differences in the composition of forces, because a number of these 35 countries are willing to provide minesweepers, but not frigates to cover them. The Emirates are not giving up and are now forming a coalition with the Europeans. What will come of this is still unclear because, for example, French President Macron stated today that the option of unblocking the Hormuz Strait by military means is unrealistic. Here is his quote. Some are advocating the idea of freeing the strait by force through a military operation. This position is sometimes voiced by the US as well, although it changes. We have never supported this option because it is unrealistic. Such military intervention would take forever and would put the ships passing through the Hormuz Strait at risk of missile attacks from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And against this backdrop, Politico writes today that Donald Trump's anger at his allies has only made them want to unite against him. Moreover, the Europeans are united in the belief that Donald Trump should not be allowed to dictate his will and are therefore actively seeking an alternative form of collective defense without the US. Politico spoke with 24 European ministers, officials, and diplomats, gathered their assessments, and the essence of these assessments comes down to a single quote from one of the diplomats. NATO is currently paralyzed. They can't even hold meetings. It's quite obvious that NATO is already falling apart. We can't wait until it's completely dead. Europeans don't yet know what the final answer to Trump's threats should be, but they're looking for a way to expand their own security structures based on this broken North Atlantic alliance. So far, Trump has managed to unite the Europeans against himself. And, as I mentioned in previous episodes, the Europeans suddenly remembered that, in fact, within the European Union there is also Article 42 of the Treaty on European Union, which talks about collective security. And now they are actively working on it and developing mechanisms for mutual defense. Well, basically it's the same as NATO's Article 5, which applies to the countries of the European Union. As Politico writes, quote, Trump destroyed transatlantic relations and united Europe in opposition. And here's where it gets really interesting. Last week, the leaders of 10 GF countries. GF is a kind of framework. I'll explain the details a bit later. The format includes the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and the Nordic Baltic 8. These are the Scandinavian countries and the Baltic states. So, the leaders of the 10 countries in this GF format gathered in Helsinki. The Museum of Gustav Mannerheim, the outstanding commander-in-chief of Finland during World War II. And there they came to the conclusion that Europeans cannot agree to the demands of the American president to join the war with Iran, because most Europeans were not informed in advance, and the Persian Gulf has nothing to do with NATO. Let me explain. If Iran had attacked NATO first, then Europeans would have been obliged to enter the war in the Persian Gulf, according to Article 5 on collective defense. But in this case, the United States struck first. If we look at it more broadly, then of course, yes, Iran was the first to attack Israel through proxy forces on October 7, 2023, using Hamas forces. But again, Israel is not a NATO member, and this is exactly the logic that is being followed in Europe. I've noticed that some Israeli commentators are very offended that today, for example, Belgium also closed Austria closed its airspace to American planes flying to bomb Iran. Basically, right now Spain, France, Austria and partially Italy are prohibiting American bombers from flying through their airspace. And for some reason the Israelis are offended by this. But let's be honest, no one asked the Europeans about this war at all, no one consulted with them. And most importantly, Donald Trump was very vocal both on social media and in his remarks to the press, but as it turned out, I decided to check this specifically today. As it turned out, the United States of America still hasn't made any official request to NATO saying that they need help. And that's exactly what starts any process at all. They haven't even requested a consultation under Article 4 of the NATO Charter. So, apart from public insults and the filth coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, there's nothing else. Next, I'll quote one of the EU's interlocutors. The US decided not to consult with its European allies before launching a sudden campaign against Iran. It's not surprising that some European countries are now banning the use of their air bases or airspace, as in France's case. Trump is facing the consequences of a unilateral approach and taking Europe for granted. For European allies, the key now is to remain united in overcoming the consequences. And as the publication writes, many NATO officials were puzzled by Trump's demands. Because, I emphasize once again, the US has not even formally or officially requested NATO's assistance in the Persian Gulf. European diplomats don't quite understand what exactly Washington wants from them. Nevertheless, the Europeans are eager to show that they really want to help, not least because their economies also depend on the restoration of trade through the Hormuz Strait. Nevertheless, the Europeans are discussing various alternative collective security structures as a backup in case NATO really falls apart. And here is the aforementioned meeting. The leaders' meeting in Helsinki took place at the end of their summit, in that very GEF format. And here is an important point. This GEF mission is about rapid deployment of troops in situations where Article 5 of the NATO Charter is not invoked. JEF is often mentioned in discussions as a basis for an alternative to NATO within Europe. Ukraine, by the way, has an agreement about the extended partnership with JEF. And Canada has already rushed to apply for membership in this kind of alliance as well. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful. You can do this with any donation, paid subscription, or sponsorship using the links and details in the description of this video. It says right there, support Alexei Pecci's channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.